Good morning. My name is Andrew Lind. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. I'd like to welcome you to the workshop series at the 2020 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. It is my pleasure today to introduce Damien Smith, Head of IT, England and Wales Cricket Board, and Stacey Levine, Director, Developer Advocacy at OutSystems. They will be presenting our workshop today, Unlocking the Coding, Winning with Data and App Dev, presented by OutSystems. And with that, I'll let these guys take it away.
Cool. Right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Can I just have a quick show of hands of people who saw the England and Wales Cricket Board OutSystems session yesterday? So there's a few of you, so there are a few that didn't see it. So I'll provide some context of what we're talking about. So I think I'll start by talking about the fact that we get an awful lot of data. I heard a phrase yesterday in one of the sessions that we're drowning in data but starved of insight. And one of the things that the sports tech environment and an awful lot of sports organisations suffer from is that there are lots and lots of point solutions that solve particular problems, but they don't always join up. So I've got a diagram here of kind of a high-level diagram of all of the different sources of data on the left-hand side that we use in cricket. So we've got playing data, we've got fan data, we've got usage data, tracking data of people on the pitch. We've got data coming in from the venues, operational data. I've got event data itself, all the different biometrics, wearables, all of the things that we're trying out on all of the players. But also, I go down into all of the sports science and medicine type aspects. Lots and lots of different sources of data. And the problem that we have is that they're all locked up in lots of different tools. Where we're talking about fan analytics, we take all of that data that holds personally identifiable information, and we use a clever bit of software and suck it out into what we call a single customer view. So that matches all of the Damien Smiths with the Damo Smiths with the D Smiths and the DH Smiths and creates one identity in a single customer view, and that feeds our CRM platform. And then from there on in, we can do all of our transactional stuff further down the track. But the real key to this is to suck all of that data out of all of those systems and put it in a data lake. And I talked a bit about this yesterday. But we have a data lake in Google Cloud Platform. It doesn't need to be in Google Cloud Platform. It can be in AWS. It can be in Azure. It can be in Alibaba. As long as it's a cloud platform, because the cloud bit gives you the ability to pick up and drop data into the data lake and use it immediately. And that's where you can really drive that kind of competitive advantage, that competitive edge, as the people responsible for delivering analytics to your organizations. So our data lake is kind of split into three conceptual areas, and I'll talk about these. Yesterday I was just talking at a very high level about this, but we'll drill down a bit now because it's quite interesting, I think. The first thing is the data hub. So conceptually, this is where we pick up and we just drop data in its source format. So we're not doing any of that source systems analysis, we're not doing any data profiling, any data cleansing, any extract, transform, load, anything like that. We are just picking it up and dropping it in its source format into a data hub. So there's a number of different sources I've listed on the left there, like Play Cricket, that's the system that looks after the recreational game. That's on a Postgres database. We pick that up and we drop it in a data hub. We've got CRM data, that's on a Microsoft Dynamics CRM platform, so we pick it up and we drop it in the data lake. We've got all sorts of different applications there in MySQL, MySQL, SQL Server, all sorts of NoSQL databases, you name it, whatever the source format is. If it's capturing information about high-density spectator Wi-Fi as people are wandering around stadiums, that stuff streams into a container or a bucket in the data hub. So the crucial thing there, source format. Sandbox is where the magic happens. So that's using all of the clever big data tools that we have at our disposal, where we can crash together data sets, knock out the outliers, work out how to join these things, apply some services like machine learning and all of those kind of things to it. That all happens in the sandbox. And then for those of you more familiar with classic BI tools, we've got a data warehouse as well. That's a classic dimensional data schema, Kimball data structure. We can form dimensions. If we want to do some reporting that requires something over a time series, or requires something that's drillable or aggregated or rolled up into things, sliced, and that's where it sits in our data warehouse. So we've got loads of different sources on the left-hand side, just pick them up and drop them, and then lots of different ways of consuming this data on the right-hand side. When we built this data lake, and it took us about 3 or 4 months to architect it, it took us about 20 minutes to build it because you're just spinning stuff up in the cloud and it's dead simple. When we built it, we anticipated that we would be building lots and lots of BI tools, lots and lots of reports, dashboards in Tableau, Power BI, Click, MicroStrategy, you name it. We wanted people to be able to plug in all of those things. And that's fine, but we've had one massive learning from doing this, which is that unless you're an accountant or unless you're an insight specialist of some description, you hate using BI tools. You get confused by them, they give you a bit of insight, but then once you've got that insight, you need to do something with it, so you need to leave your BI tool and you need to go and do something else with it somewhere else. So it's still very good. We do use BI tools, but we use them for accountants and insight specialists. But for the people who we really want to engage with the analytics, the people who we really want to adopt this stuff, they're players, they're coaches. They're not going to learn how to use a BI tool. What are they doing? They're on their phones. They're on their phones all the time. So we need to give them an app on their phone. So we searched around for how to do this, and that's where we encountered OutSystems. So OutSystems is a low-code application development environment. Stacey's going to talk about this in a bit of detail in a minute. And what it enables us to do, just like you can build a dashboard in a week in a BI tool, you can build an app in a week in a low-code application development environment. So we still do use BI tools. We still do use lots of services and APIs that are available, AutoML, those kind of things. In fact, I guess that there's a lot more detail to this, so if I drill down another tier, if you like, you can see how on Google Cloud Platform, there's the Data Hub, which has got lots and lots of different things in source format. There's our Data Sandbox, which is using lots of clever tools within Google Cloud Platform to crash these things together. And there's our Data Warehouse. And then there's a few management and ETL and integration tools around the place. And then on the right-hand side is how we deliver that stuff to our end users. The thing is, when we draw this diagram, as soon as we've drawn it, it's out of date. Because this kind of architecture allows us to just plug things in and experiment with it. Because the key to this is your data. The key to this is your data. You don't want it locked in tools. You don't want it locked in proprietary things where you're dependent upon your suppliers. You want to own that data and be able to do things with it. There's a piece of research, I think it was Gartner research, or they were quoting it anyway, I don't know if it's their research or somebody else's research, which was talking about the half-life of your skills that you learn at university if you're doing a technical degree. So if you did a technical degree in the 60s, then the half-life for your skills and your knowledge was about 30 years. Wind that forward to the early 1970s, the half-life for all of the things, how relevant that information is that you learnt in that degree in the early 70s, if you did a degree then, 15 years. Present day, half-life for understanding and relevance for all of the skills you learn, between 3 and 5 years. Which means that if you're doing a 4-year degree, the stuff you learn on day one could be obsolete by the time you graduate. So you need a flexible architecture in order to accommodate what you need to do. And this, we think, we've achieved it. So I'm going to hand over to Stacey now. He's going to talk through, give a bit of example of how you can start to pull some of these things together, and he's going to do it in a kind of a very quick scenario here, and then we'll show you how that over a week could then turn into something more significant. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Damien. So just to reiterate, so we talked, Damien has a plethora of tools out there. The problem is, right, lots and lots of tools, lots of growing tools, lots of places for your data, applications. How do you bring them together, surface them, so everybody can use them wherever they are, interact, so you make the most use of the data that you're gathering, right? OutSystems it's actually a general purpose, low code development platform. You're gonna see it in action in just a second, but this is what development looks like. Now, just a few questions for the audience. How many people in here would say that they're a developer? So a handful of you. Now, keep your hands up just for a second. How many of you have written that in R, Python, if you haven't, raise your hands, SQL, any other type of thing? So you're all actually developers. Thanks, put your hands down. Now, this is probably aimed at the students more, but APIs they're a very current modern way to integrate with different systems. Would you believe, now the enterprises here can actually attest, but Excel is also very, very common, and the IT departments hate Excel because it comes with all sorts of problems, right? So this is just kind of setting the groundwork for what I'm going to show you. But again, OutSystems, it's a general purpose application development platform for creating web and mobile apps on current technologies, right? So you can create a mobile app that gets deployed to the Apple Store and the Android Store. Oh, and you can also do a PWA, or it's called a progressive web application, or just a web application, all with the same platform. So this is titled a workshop. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to actually show you something. Now, in a short period of time, let's keep in mind what I'm going to show you is a simple use case. And let's flip over to my story. So now, let's say you work for Major League Baseball, and your job is to deliver data to all of the places that need team player information, right? So basic level data. Let's say your first contact is with EA Games, and they're working on the next version of Major League Baseball for insert platform of choice there. And you've gotten tired of sending spreadsheets and updating the spreadsheet, and then a player gets traded, and so you update another spreadsheet, and now you've forgotten which one is the master, so you're like, oh, sorry, ignore the one I sent you yesterday because I sent you the one from 2 weeks ago. Right? So this is a problem, and they've gotten annoyed, and now, by the way, you've got 15 other requests for this data. So how do you keep track? Wouldn't it be better if you had a system where you could easily update, maintain the master data, right? So now it's enterprise, it's backed up, and there's an API available to where the people that need it, assuming they have the right access and information, could access that API data whenever you want it. Right? So this is my simple scenario. I'm starting with the standard Excel spreadsheet. I actually found and downloaded this yesterday. This is 2019 Major League Baseball data, so if anybody is a super fan and sees something wrong, then sorry about that. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the development tool. This is where I would start as a developer. And I'm going to go in and I'm just going to say, I'm creating a new application. I have different choices of types of application, whether I'm creating a web or a mobile application. And we even have the ability to create themes. So let's say you're Major League Baseball and you use OutSystems to create a number of applications. You might want to set on a standard set of branding. And so you could create a theme with all of that branding and start from there. So every application looks like you want. For now, I'm just going to start with a generic application and go, and we'll call this Major League Baseball info. And I could pick colors, I could give it a description, do things like give it an icon. I am super creative that way. And I start creating the application, and now I've got the stub, the basic start. Okay? So give it a second for the internet here to catch up to me. What it's doing is it's setting up the general structure of the application. This is my development environment. It is the same look and feel, the same tool, whether I'm doing web or mobile applications, which is important. So just like Damien was saying, where your skills change. If I were to develop using traditional tools an application, let's say I wanted to create a mobile application. Great. Am I going to do iOS or Android? Why does that matter? Well, maybe I'd have to learn Objective-C or Swift for iOS, and then I would have to do Android, so Java. And if I've got two apps, how do I maintain application parity? Right? So the same features and the same bug fixes and everything in both skill sets. Great. Now what about web? It's a very large, complicated skill set to be a full stack developer and cover all of the devices that's there. With the platform, I can do the same application, the same skills across the board. Everything starts with data, right? So the platform lets me connect to data wherever it lives, either via APIs or connect to databases. Here I said I've got a spreadsheet. This is really common to get rid of spreadsheets. So we've actually built a wizard that lets me get rid of spreadsheets even faster. And I'm going to say import from Excel, point to this, and if I give it a second, it's going to say, hey, do I want to import the teams and player tabs, which I just showed you, and I'm going to say import. You're going to see some stars in the platform come up. That's just some of the automation in the platform helping you out. Where the automation happens, it's completely changeable. So what just happened here? It created tables, put in the data structures with data types. You could change them. So this was now sitting on top of a SQL database, right, for both tables. It built logic. This is programming, right? So let's look at the load data for teams. You've never seen OutSystems before, probably. And so this is your first view in here. If I tell you this is a query, all of a sudden this starts to make sense and you can follow this, right? So this is a query to join against the team, and there's no filters, anything else. It just says, hey, get the data from the teams. And then this looks like a condition, right? It is a condition. It's looking to see if it's empty. If it is empty, it goes forward. If it's not, it ends. Why? Well, this is loading data from Excel, and you don't want to keep loading the data over and over again, so it's checking the SQL table to make sure you haven't loaded data yet, and if so, it runs. And it converts from Excel. This next one looks like a loop. It is a loop. It loops through the results. It builds a big record, right? And then it writes it to the table. This is pretty intuitive, and this works on an automated process. Now, Excel is not relational, and if I really want to do queries, I want there to be a joins in the table. So I want to do a few modifications before I even get started over what happened. The first thing I want to do, if I look at my data model, right, I can look at players and teams right here, and there's no data between them. So I want to change that. I want to just quick make a relation between players and teams, and if I refresh my model over here, I'll see that there's now a foreign key relationship between players and teams. So now I've got my data structure a little bit better, but I need to change my logic. Right? So loading teams first, then I can load the players between that. So this pre-built architecture didn't include that logic. So what do I want to do? I want to make a quick change, and I'm going to drag this over here, which is simply a query to get the data from the teams. And this would look like Access, if you've used that, or some other visual query tool. And I just need to do a simple filter to say, hey, I want to get the team ID, which is now the newly added foreign key, based off of the old team ID that was in Excel, and that is equal to what's in the player data in that loop that I'm looking at. And I just need to go down to the team field right here. So all I'm doing is a query just to make sure that it's okay. And notice it is giving me an error, and it says it can't identify something. So I just would do this, right? I would go in and fix it, and then in my assignment record down here, I would go and change. Last thing I have to do is assign this value. So now I actually create the relationship to the results from my query. So while this data was already created, I need to do that. I have one other tweak that I need to do before we can see the results. And the automatic wizard doesn't know that there's a relationship between the tables. So it says, hey, just load these in any order. I need to change that and make the order matter. So I'm going to create one more function that says, hey, I want to load the teams, and then I want to load the players. And all I have to do is change one of the functions right here to do this. Now, again, this is a relatively simple application, and I'll go back to tell you in a second how long this would take if I was doing this with traditional development. Now, all I've done right now is mess with data. I haven't given you any view of the information. So I need to give you a way to see the data, maybe edit some of it, and I can simply drag and drop. This is a really common task, right? So when I drag and drop information, this is quickly creating list detail screens, or are often called CRUD, right? Create, read, update, delete screens. It's got authentication built in. I'm going to go ahead for my sample purposes and just make the pages anonymous so I can see the data that goes on. And now I'm good. I'm going to click this green button up at the top, this publish button. What's happening? So behind the scenes, and you can see the steps down at the bottom, it's taking this visual model of the application that I've developed, sending it to the server, which for my sample exists in OutSystems Cloud. We give you the option to put that wherever you want. So AWS, Azure, a data server in your closet, wherever you want, or in our cloud, it doesn't actually matter. So it takes that visual model and it's turning it into standard enterprise code. In this case, it's a combination of .NET, CSS, HTML5, React, right? Standard current technologies, but I'm doing it all in a visual method. Right? And then it's created the website and now it's actually live. When I launch my application, remember this didn't exist 5 minutes ago, it was just an Excel spreadsheet. I've got pages with teams and players, and maybe I want to search. Right? So this came already with some of those wizards really quickly. When I go back to the team, I notice, hey, wait a minute. I've got phone number, but I don't have the team name there. But if I click, I can see the team name. So I should probably fix some of this. And then maybe I want to, maybe that was misspelled. Okay, so now I misspelled it, but that's fine. So I've already got this way to, edit the data, and now I've got a master data. So I solved problem one of which is my master data. So I want to fix my UI and go back to that original problem of create an API for other people to access this data. Now I'm just going to do read access. So first let me fix the UI and put the team name in, and I don't care so much on that top level about phone number, but I definitely want the team name. This data element was name display full, and I can get rid of phone number, and then I just need to change this back to phone number was linked to the detail page, so now I've just got the team name is linked to the detail page, right? So I fixed that display problem. Now I want to expose the API. Exposing an API, I do it with the same way as I would create. On the logic or the programming tab, I would go to REST because that's common. I could do the SOAP as well. It doesn't actually matter. And I'm going to call this MLB info. And I want to simply say get. I want to add a method which says get teams. Now, of course, if I was doing this for enterprise, I would add security. I might do some filtering. I might do anything else. That just takes a few minutes longer, and I'm trying to give you an idea of why using the platform is faster and helps solve the problems of how do you make all of this valuable information available to the people that need it. So I've got a method now that calls the get teams, and it returns something. In this case, I need to return the team information, which from a data perspective, it's a list of teams, right? So I'm simply changing the return value of this API to say, hey, I want to do a list of teams. And if I do a straightforward query of the list of teams and then assign that to the output, and now I publish this. So I started from Excel. I created an application with actual relational data, and I created 4 screens and published them out there. Then I didn't like some of the screens where I wasn't displaying the information, so I changed that, and now I've just exposed an API. Well, from a development point of view, I'm done creating the API, but from a user point of view, you really need the documentation on how to use the API. That doesn't always exist. Here's an awesome thing with using the platform. When we create APIs, we use a standard definition format called Swagger, which says, hey, here's the definition and how to use this API that's out there, right? So any developer, if I gave them this, or anybody, right, you can even use this if you're saying, hey, Google Sheets, and I want to tie the data in Google Sheets to an API. This actually is a live API, returning data right now. So I started talking about 7 minutes ago from Excel. I now have, that would be impressive if I did nothing other than just expose this API. Right? If I simply launch my application one more time, keep in mind I made a change now to display the name as well on the teams. Right? This is a pretty simple application. Right? I'm not trying to say this is to show any degree of complexity at all. My background, okay, more years than I care to think about, but lots of .NET and Microsoft development as well as other technologies. Just to do this amount of work, if I got handed this task and everybody left me alone for the day, this would take probably a day's worth of work. Right? Does anybody think they could do it faster? Much longer? Right? So this would be, again, for me, it would have taken about a day's worth of work to do. I can do this in minutes with the platform. So now scale this out to an enterprise and bigger applications. That's the idea. And there's a lot more that you can do, whether it's integrating with all sorts of other tools, and there's built-in connectors. So at the OutSystems website, we have this idea. It's an open source repository called The Forge. We've got over 3,000 components in The Forge. So look, there's 3,219 open source apps, everything from Google Maps to connectors to Azure Cognitive Services to use some of their AI information, to things like MQTT if you're subscribing to a queue of information to get some real-time sensor data, to all sorts of different things. Everything in here is open source for you to download, use, extend the platform, make use of those types of things that you want, right, in order to build those real enterprise applications. Before I go forward, I want to pause and see if there's any questions, and then we're going to show some more things. Anybody have questions right now? Sure, yeah, go ahead.
How does the data lake integrate with the starting point for your application was a spreadsheet?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you harnessing the data lake?
Great. So just to repeat the question is, in this instance, how do I harness the data lake, or how would I get data from other sources? Right? So I'll let Damien answer how he accesses his specific data lake. In general, just as fast as I could expose an API, I can consume SOAP and REST APIs. Out of the box, the platform connects to SQL, Oracle, MySQL, iSeries DB2. There are lots of other ways to connect to other databases wherever they are. I know in our Forge we have a connection to Snowflake. And how do you do the connection?
So if you like, in that situation, the Excel spreadsheet is an analog for the data lake. So all of our data in databases inside the data lake, it's just dead simple to just connect OutSystems to do that. It can just read those databases.
Are you connecting to like a semantic layer on top of it, or are you connecting to just like the raw data?
That's a really good question. I think the answer is both. So depending on the requirement, a lot of requirements where people come and ask for data, you can kind of satisfy that requirement really quickly by connecting to raw data. Where we talk about the data warehouse component of the data lake, then there's a semantic layer or set of views over that, which OutSystems will connect to that instead of to the raw data underlying it.
So let's take a second and show some of what, Damien, do you want to show?
Yeah, sure.
So he's going to take a second and show in a little bit more time what you could do, right? In obviously a very quick amount of time, I wanted to give you a flavor of what it's like to develop with the platform. Please don't think that that's all you can do. Damien's going to show, it's your the Cricket application, right?
Yeah, I mean, we build a lot of applications, but right. So the theory is, if I press something on here, then that's going to show up on that screen. Is that right?
Yes, it's there.
Right. Yeah. So, what about if I tilt it?
Yep.
Okay. That's better. Right. Gotcha. So the one thing that I talked about yesterday in the talk was I took through kind of a step-by-step process of building what we call our interactive coach application. And so what you're looking at here, this took about a week to build, and what you're looking at here is a list of all of the bowlers in the country. This is test data, so I don't think I'm betraying any confidences, but I'm going to look at particular bowlers, and then if I want to have a look at the particular details, so here's a chap called Reece Topley, and there's some kind of high-level stats there for him. But if I look at his bowling, then one of the things that we do with these bowlers, which I talked about earlier, is that we cover them in dots like they do in Hollywood films, and capture their bowling action with Vicon cameras. So here's Reece Topley bowling and using a Vicon camera. But then what we also do is, using some clever machine learning models, is somebody with Reece Topley's build and biomechanics, this is what we think the optimal bowling action would be for a person like him. And then what this shows is a number of things which are maybe counterintuitive. I'm not a biomechanist, but I've had these things pointed out to me a number of times. But if you look at the front leg, then apparently it's really good to have that dead straight, almost hyperextended. It looks horrible. But apparently that means that all of the pace generated in the run-up then goes into the ball when you deliver it. It also means that you're less prone to soft tissue injuries because you're not putting any strain on a flexed knee. So then the bowler then gets all of these stats, understands there's a load of metrics at the bottom here that are indications for him about how he's bowling. Now, what's happened behind the scenes here is there's just a number of different data sources. There's the Vicon data. So we get the Vicon data, we stick it in the data lake with the associated video. There's some metrics here. We stick that in the data lake. Then we put a pretty standard, fairly straightforward, easy to use application on the front of it, built using OutSystems. And the crucial thing that this solves for us is that we used to just get the bowlers for one day a year. And then we used to enthuse them with this, and we used to work on stuff, and then they'd disappear and they'd go back to their club, and then we'd lose touch with them. Now we have this year-long collaborative dialogue with them. And if I want, I can also, I'll show you the fact that we jointly create player development plans with them. So if I look at Reece Topley, there's a whole load of targets and things that he's worked out with people with his coaches and with the development staff. And also we're able to upload video here. This might have noise associated with it, so I apologize if this happens. But and this is reference video which was taken at the National Cricket Performance Centre, saying, well, this is where you were bowling really well. And so if he ever wants to see what good looks like, then he's got that. You can see his front leg's pretty good there. But also, crucially, he can upload video and his coach can upload video. And then we can comment on that. Our performance analysts and biomechanists can then comment on that at the National Cricket Performance Centre. So we've got Kitty Stewart here has made some comments on some of those videos. So all this is a useful app that the players engage with, the coaches engage with, and it controls the whole workflow from end to end. It's not putting stuff in a BI tool and then showing people some information, and then they have to do something with it outside of that BI tool, like build a development plan or something. So it's just another way that this helps. I've got a couple of more examples, one that looks more like a BI tool. So our selectors like all of the stats. So here's our a kind of high-level dashboard of all of the England qualified players up and down the right-hand side, all the people that are performing particularly well in the various forms of cricket. And then I can drill through to look at the top batsmen. This is currently filtered for English qualified batsmen, but if I take that filter off, then I'm looking at every batsman in the world who's playing professional cricket, and that list goes on and on and on. If I, oops, sorry, wrong button. There's something slightly odd about the Wi-Fi here, which means that I need to keep doing this. But the other thing that we have this fantastic advantage of being able to do in sport analytics is I built lots of dashboards like this for investment banking and for fast-moving consumer goods in my time. We have a rule of thumb, which is that every query should end with a video, because you do your kind of analysis and then you want to go, right, show me. So if I look here, I can take the England captain, Joe Root, and I can see every ball he's ever faced. I can filter this, but it's in near real time as well, so we can see that the last test match, this is looking only at test matches, the last test match we played was against South Africa. If I scroll down here, he's played a pretty good shot here. He's got 4 runs against Patterson, so let's have a look at that. And that's his shot. And so we have people that look at an awful lot of video, either their players or their coaches or their selectors. We call this a selector app because selectors use this and watch an awful lot of video because they're trying to work out how to beat opposition, which teams, players to select in order to beat the opposition. And we've got this for bowling and everything like that as well. We also do some really mundane apps. I don't think I'll show you those, but things like we distribute a lot of money to grassroots cricket, so people can apply for a loan for a new lawnmower or for nets or for a new pavilion or something like that, and it's just like a pretty standard banking system, and they can follow it through like that. But it's a way of engaging people beyond just business intelligence tools.
So thanks. So hopefully that helps. So keep in mind what Damien was just showing you, where apps built quickly, especially by current modern traditional development standards. He gave his first example was built in a week. And it was aggregating lots of data from different places, whether it's videos, whether it's data from data lakes, all into something that's easy to use and engaging with your audience, right, in a method that you weren't able to keep up with before. So there's a competitive advantage of sorts in order to be able to deliver all of this information easy with a single skill set. So hopefully that answered some more of the data lake, how do you connect to different things. Pretty much everything nowadays has easy ways to connect and do that. There are other questions that I can answer at the moment. Sure.
How much familiarity did you have with the OutSystems platform prior to building that app that took you a week?
So just to repeat, just for people who didn't hear us, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. So he asked, how much familiarity did the developers have with OutSystems? Or I'd say, how easy is OutSystems to learn? That's actually a really good question, and let me just show one more quick slide. And you'll steal my last slide, but that's perfectly fine. So OutSystems has a free version for you to try out yourself. It's really easy. You don't have to go, all you really have to remember is outsystems.com. In the upper right, there's a button that says try for free. If you want, also, we have a booth out the door just to the We go out the door just to the left, stop by, we have stickers and some other things and help you remember. There's lots and lots of learning materials, literally hundreds of hours of learning materials and a course. The starting web course that says, hey, I want to learn, if you follow all of the videos in the order that they've got for the Intro to Web one, it's around 25, 30 hours. But you talk about your development team's experience.
Yeah, so England Wales Cricket Board doesn't have any development capability, so we outsource everything. So we have a number of different OutSystems partners that develop apps for us, but we also have a number of organisations that don't use OutSystems, that develop apps and capability for us. And one of the things that we found is that we've managed to convert those people to use OutSystems because they would rather use OutSystems than code it themselves, because it gives them, sorry, something happening with my microphone, because it gives them the ability to deliver quickly on it. But we actually don't have any capability ourselves, so we get lots of people to develop stuff for us.
Well, what we generally find is if you have, and keep in mind when I say development background, I'm talking you've got some experience with databases, understand queries, relational databases, because that's a good tenet for starting anything. And if you've done any type of web or mobile development and have a basic understanding of how the web works, and maybe CSS, you can start in a couple of hours. I mean, when you download it, the first video is build an app in 5 minutes as a tutorial, and then it takes you from there. Yeah, in the back. Sorry, he's got a microphone right next to him.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about restricting content for certain users in the app?
Yeah, so there's various for us. There's various layers of security over how the data lake works. If you think, we've got some very sensitive data sets. So we've got medical data, all the medical imaging. There's 12 years of the best England fast bowlers' spine MRIs in our data lake. That sounds, potentially for people who are not confident about putting things in the cloud, that sounds like a potential information security risk. For us, it's quite the opposite, because actually the alternative to that is that that information resides on people's laptops or on DVDs that are kicking around the place. So now actually we have the capability to, if we're touring in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka and there's an injury and somebody gets an MRI, then we can upload that into our data lake, and then everybody can view it from there without having the risk of that being elsewhere. So yeah, medical data, safeguarding data, so lots of investigations into safeguarding issues and anti-corruption and anti-doping type data, highly sensitive. So at source, not at source, in the data lake, if you like, is our control point for protecting that data. So it's crucial for us to get the stuff into the data lake and then start managing access to that. So at source, we manage how people can access that data and who's allowed to do it on a roles-based access process. But then you have the added tier of access for any of the apps that you build. You can build in all the necessary security there as well. So you'll find that some apps, people will be able to log in and see data. I showed you test data there, but the roles-based access, when Reece Topley, for example, logs into that, he'll be able to see his information, but he won't be able to see the biomechanics of other people. The biomechanical analysis available to a coach, he'll be able to see all the people that he coaches or she coaches, and that's built into the app, if you like. So there's kind of varying tiers of doing that. Does that answer the question?
And the platform has a bunch of built-in capabilities to where you can create a role, create access permissions around the role, and do it in a visual nature. So it's there, and as well as whether you want to do things at the data layer. Lots of different ways to do it depending on the app needs. Okay, and then,
For organizations that have development resources, other than efficiency, speed to market, are there any other benefits of using OutSystems from a development standpoint? My concern here is selling this to developers on my team, potentially to use.
Sure. There are a lot of advantages. Now, I don't know your particular team or makeup. So one, and I'm going to go back to speed for a minute. So speed is a huge competitive advantage, right? Here's a real life scenario, and I've seen a bunch of times. So developers, sometimes they're like, hey, I'm not sure I want to use that. I am a master craftsman at what I do, and that's what I want to do. And then other groups are like, hey, let's give it a shot. I don't want to, me personally, I don't want to build yet another screen to show data in yet another way, right? Damien's application is awesome for end users, right? For me, that wouldn't be necessarily the exciting parts. The exciting parts would be, hey, how do I use Google Cloud Compute better? How do I do something better trying to analyze those videos? How can I tie into more machine learning models? So for me, I get to work faster for delivering the boring stuff. Sorry, I'm not saying data's boring, but presenting data is not necessarily the most exciting. So for me, I get to focus on that faster, do some of the harder stuff that might take longer, more. It also allows me, outside of using the platform, I've written one mobile app ever just to prove that I could, right? And that was, I don't even want to tell you how I did it because it's embarrassing. I've never written an iOS app, but I've written a bunch without systems. Yes, I've run a few Swift tutorials or Objective-C. I don't want to have to learn those. And then I have to do Java, but I've got, if I want to do Android, but I'm a .NET developer, right? So my skill set is greatly enhanced. I'm actually more valuable to the business, right? If you go to me and say, oh yeah, I can give that to you in a week, and you go to somebody else and they say, oh wait, I can give you the iOS one in 2 weeks, the Android one in 2 weeks, and a website in another week after that, who's going to be more valuable, right? And then you're going to get more of the fun projects. So it allows me to broaden my skill set, focus on the more interesting things, and be more valuable to the business.
I think from the perspective of the ECB, so I'm responsible for technology at the ECB. I think the key things for us are speed of delivery. So if you're doing things very fast, then you can find out if they work very quickly. Whereas the traditional kind of waterfall approach of doing IT projects, you might not find out that it's unsuccessful until 6 months down the track, by which time you've spent too much money and nobody dare admit that it's a failure. So you keep kind of flogging a dead horse until it works. I described my first few years at work at the ECB as basically shooting dead horses, all these projects that were kind of carrying on going. I think the other thing that's crucial, which Stacey touched on there, is that I don't want it to be my problem when there's a new iPhone that comes out, or there's a new Android, or there's a new operating system for those kind of things. From a single code base, using low code, from a single code base, you hit a button and say, right, I want the iPhone app, I want the iPad app, I want the Android app. And then it becomes somebody else's problem, i.e. OutSystems, to make sure that they're keeping up with all of those changes in technology. And I think that's true for most low code. I think the one thing that made us select OutSystems over other low code environments is also that it compiles to .NET and Java. So if at some stage in the future we fall out with OutSystems, heaven forbid, then we've still got all of our applications and they still work. Whereas there are other low code application environments out there where if you fall out with them and you switch it off, then all of your apps die. So we think that's a big selling point for that as a kind of a risk management perspective.
How would you integrate third-party services such as payment processing and geofencing into the applications?
Sorry, I didn't
I'm sorry.
Can you repeat that,
understand
please?
the question.
How would you integrate third-party services such as payment processing, geofencing, especially with things related to sports betting, into these applications?
Sure. So those are actually two different things. So just to repeat, it's how do you integrate with other stuff? If I shorten it down. With payment processing gateways, there are different methods. A lot of them have an API, so just like I exposed a REST API, I could consume a REST API or SOAP API that way. If I'm talking geofencing, that's a more device level feature. And when you're doing geofencing, in the majority of the cases that I've dealt with, you're actually probably using some type of mobile device management system like AirWatch. Is that in your case, or are you talking just building it natively into the device? Because there's a slight different answer either way.
I don't exactly know. I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the developers.
Sure, so I'll answer both ways, just to cover in case. So there's a class of applications out there called mobile device management, like AirWatch, and BlackBerry has one, and there's IBM has another one. They have SDKs that allow you compile them into your application, and we have a way using JSON, which is just like an XML language that allows you to say, hey, include this, and then you implement the geofencing through their software. If you want to implement geofencing natively, right, well, there's a plugin to allow you to get the device location. So from the Forge, I would download that, and then I would click on it. And now I would build a back office that says, get my geolocation, right, which comes from the device, and then you would have to either do some type of data entry to say it is allowed to be used within this place. And so on the screen, you would have an option that might check the location and say, oh, you're out of bounds, or different ways to do it. But easily done with the platform, you just have to choose which way. The platform is a general purpose development application, right? So that all of those things that you say, how do I integrate with X? How do I make use of that database or this other service? There are ways to do it. It just depends on the various technologies that you're integrating with. The hardest one I've ever been asked was, hey, this vendor has a website, and there's no API, there's no access to the database, and there's nothing. Honestly, how do I integrate with that is not an OutSystems question. That's first, why did you choose that vendor? Second, right, fine, let's come up with a way to do it. And whether that's go and write a PHP script to scrape the data, dump it to a text file, and import it with OutSystems, or utilize some web screen scraping method from OutSystems, that's probably the hardest integration scenario I've faced. And I've been in OutSystems for 6 years. So. Other questions? Yeah, and he's bringing a mic.
Thanks. Do you support connecting to WebSockets?
Do we connect to WebSockets?
Yep.
Right, so like Node.js or MQTTs or just a general WebSocket?
Just the general protocol. I mean, I made my own, so like my own WebSocket because I don't work. I'm just kind of pulling stuff together, and I'm interested how that would interact with that.
So the places where we've done WebSockets, more for, again, just to clarify for people who may not be aware, WebSockets are typically something for more real-time data processing. So you might have a sensor pushing real-time data, or think of stock market. These are the use cases that you're thinking, right? Yeah, okay. So the typical way with the platform is not directly, but there's different ways around it. So if you did a WebSocket connected to some type of queue technology, whether it's Microsoft's queue or Amazon has an MQTT, right? So you could do that and then tie in with the platform. Or I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they had just Node.js running on wherever they wanted. And anytime the node received a data packet, they called an API. So you expose a web service to receive data in the platform, and you expose an API to do that. But no, it's not going to be a WebSocket direct pub/sub type receiver. But there are ways to accomplish it. At least not right now. The platform is always changing. So here, history-wise, OutSystems has been around 19 years. It's founded in Lisbon, Portugal, headquarters actually here in Boston. Technology has evolved. Our first customer is still a customer, and one of the things they're really happy about is the developers have continued to build on OutSystems, but when, as Damien alluded to, when technology changes, we make changes to the platform, we upgrade it, they republish their applications, and now they're taking advantage of newer features. So it helps evade some of that technology half-life and allow you really to focus on delivering solutions. Any other questions?
What's the debugging experience like, particularly when you've got a developer who's working within a system they're not familiar with?
Sure. What's the debugging experience like? There's a way where you set a breakpoint and you start the debugger and start. So it's very similar to whatever you're doing. I can flip over real quick and show you. So if I wanted to go back to my development environment and look really quickly, if I wanted to say, hey, do this, I would add a breakpoint and then click start debugging, and then it's going to run, and when I cause something that, I would have a visual method to see the breakpoint. Here's also all the error logs, all the system logs, all of the things that you expect. By the way, I only showed you a very base bones of OutSystems. There's monitoring involved. This comes with multiple environments, right? The next question is, great, I've done all this development in dev, and it's time to move it to QA. How do I move it to QA? What if I've got dependencies? We've got a one-click migration to deploy to the next environment. Lots of other things in there, right? And I'm happy to answer more questions if you stop by our booth afterwards. I do want to mention, please, if you're at all interested, stop by the booth, drop in your card or sign up to enter to win a Twitch. Nintendo Switch, not a Twitch. I have teenage boys, what can I say? Any other questions? Well, I think we're right on time now. So I appreciate everything. Again, please stop by if you have further questions later. Thank you very much. Thank you, Damien, for your help.
Cheers. Thanks.